Good evening, everyone. Time for us to begin. We have been talking about choices during this quarter. As we always do, we start with Deuteronomy 30, verse 15, where Moses set a charge to the children of Israel. See, I've set before you today life and good and death and evil. And a little bit later down that chapter, he says, choose life. And Joshua, in the same vein, gives a charge to the children of Israel as well. Choose this day who you're going to serve. So that's what we've been talking about all quarter. We're talking about I choose to love my spouse. We'll probably end up in that tonight and then get into choose to raise my kids. But before we begin, ask for Ron Samala, if you would, to lead us in a word of prayer. Amen. Thank you. Just some housekeeping a little bit. It occurred to me, Wendell Ford came up to me after Sunday, I guess it was Sunday afternoon or Sunday. I was talking to Ron Apsher, and he came up to me and grabbed my arm. He looked at Ron and he said, this guy's trying to tell me how I should be married or something like that, or something to that effect. So it occurred to me that I'm not qualified to teach this lesson. Or this next lesson coming up. We've been married for 16 years, and I don't have as many reps as other people. We're going by what the author says. I don't know what his marriage is like, but Jess and I are still in this experiment phase of raising kids, so I'm not sure what the final product's going to be. So, again, don't feel qualified to teach this, but some things we can certainly talk about. Second thing, on question 2, I shared some quotes. One of them was, and I got these quotes from my website, one of them was, share the same conviction. And the quote said, even if you don't practice the same religion. I want to back off that and say that it's pretty important for you to share the same religion if you're sharing the same conviction. So that caused some issues in life if you don't share the same religion, worshiping God and things like that. So that's just some things I wanted to clear up. We're going to truck on to the rest of the questions in lesson 7. God made us male and female. Besides the obvious differences, what are the other emotional differences? What does each gender bring to the marriage? I had, what does society typically say men should do with their feelings, why it's much more acceptable for women to do this? What are men typically told to do? Bottle it up. Don't share these feelings. Women typically share with each other. They're more prone to talk about, demonstrate with fears and hand gestures and body language. And we're supposed to just process, men supposed to just process these inwardly, typically, or according to society. Sometimes we don't know how we feel. We're trying to figure it out. And we're afraid to share these emotions, and we keep them inside, and we don't share because they make us look weak. And we're also more physical, so we tend to work out our emotions by finding solutions and doing things. But the harm of that is keeping it all stuffed inside. You'll let that simmer and brew, and it'll potentially just eat away at you, come out as anger. So, tremendous benefits of sharing our feelings with each other, dudes. I don't know if anybody else had any other thoughts about this. What each gender brings to the marriage and the differences we have. Yes, Kyle.
Yeah, way the question was worded, I don't know that I think it's maybe the most healthiest thing
Yeah.
it can create this, just like what you're saying, men are supposed to do
Right.
this, women are supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I met plenty of men who are very touchy-feely. You know, something is bothering them, it's going to bring them to tears. They're going to handle that different than maybe other men will. And yet the whole point of this lesson is I choose to love my spouse. I think that there's plenty of times and examples where you see husbands and wives that maybe don't fit the model of what society says this is what a man's supposed to look like, this is what a woman's supposed to act like, this is, but yet they complement each other. And they love each other for that. And that's the very concept in Genesis 2 when he says, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Here is my complement. Here's the person who fits me. But even if we're in a marriage where we don't have that, maybe I'm touchy-feely and things just really very tender-hearted and my wife is too, and we don't complement each other. We're just both a mess.
Yeah.
I still make a choice in that.
Right.
Say, I'm going to love them. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to try to help them in the way that they need help. I'm going to try to care for them in the way that I would want someone to care for me.
Yeah, very good. We complement each other, choose to complement each other. It may not be balanced all the way, but a choice to help each other, encourage one another. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? What is leave and cleave, and what is it not? What does it mean? What does leave and cleave mean? Make. That's your family.
Leave your physical.
Does it mean mom and dad can never help or whatever? No, not at all. But the decision made by the couple.
Comes first.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Family comes first.
You know, some of the greatest help that Moses got came from his father-in-law.
Yeah.
When Jethro came and gave him advice on, you're doing too much. You need to divide up the work that's going on. All of this is on you. You need to divide that up between other men.
Yeah.
I think we have to be very careful that we don't have a sense of arrogancy and pride when we take this notion that we are leaving loyalties and creating a new loyalty with our spouse. This is a new unit, but that doesn't come with with an arrogance that says, and this unit is better than every other unit, and knows all the right ways and is not going to make any mistakes. There is a great wisdom in saying, yes, I am loyal to my spouse. It doesn't matter what mom and dad say. At the end of the day, this is me and my spouse joined together in the sight of God. But mom and dad might have some good advice that we need to listen to.
Sure. Yep. More seasoned, they know a little better. It's okay to ask advice from them, but the ultimate decision is the unit of the family, or the spouses. Anybody else got any thoughts or revelation or anything you want to share in that for that question? Jesus allows one exception for divorce-free marriage, Matthew 19:9. Is it necessary? Does some discuss some practical necessary ways a couple can overcome this and make the relationship stronger? The first thing I thought of is, first and foremost, there has to be forgiveness. Forgiveness needs to be asked for, and desire to change must be present, right? We read in Colossians 3 about putting on the putting off the old self and putting on the new self. And little play of words we got from a lesson some time back. Change playmates, change playthings, change the playground. There has to be a desire to change. There has to be a visible, got to be seen. You got to be some tangible evidence of changes happening. So, any other things that would have to take place or thoughts that you might have had on that question?
Brad, that first question, is it necessary?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a fallacy that some people have, that a marriage is over when someone is unfaithful.
Right.
Jesus' teaching in Matthew 19:9 is not that when there's unfaithfulness, the marriage is dissolved. The teaching is, this is how you dissolve it in the case of unfaithfulness. But in Mark 10, Mark doesn't even record the exception. He just flat out, when they ask him, can we divorce our wives for any reason, he says no.
Yeah.
And I think the reason Mark records that, one, is because of the immediacy. He's telling a story, he's going on to the next thing, but he's also laying out a default. This is our default understanding of this. This is not an option, but there's a time when it is. But before we ever get to that, forgiveness is certainly something that needs to come up. Oftentimes for forgiveness to happen, there needs to be communication and discussion that takes place. And I can't think of a better time to really get intimate with the elders of your congregation than a time like that.
Yeah.
We're in a dangerous spot. We need help. And you are some guys that have shown through wisdom on how to deal with problems. You've shown through wisdom on how to make marriages work. We need help.
Yeah.
And I think that should be a priority in a situation like that we want to try to find that help from somewhere that we can trust, but also that can help us.
Yeah. Good points about that one.
Hey, Brad.
Yes. Uh-huh.
His first wife, and somehow it came up that it wasn't, and it was not my business to ask
Right.
or whatever. He just felt the need to tell me that he actually, his first spouse was unfaithful, and he forgave her and accepted her back, and because he felt like I'm not doing everything God expected me to do,
Yeah.
and giving every effort to reconcile if she's willing to do it. And so they reconciled, and then that spouse actually decided to run off, like leaving.
Yeah.
He only know where she went. Let's
Right.
for that same relationship she had outside of the divorce. So he felt then he was through that process. He was, and I said that is about as good of an example as I think that would have to be what we're going for here.
Yeah.
There's a couple different preachers I heard before that wholeheartedly believe it's not acceptable to do this.
Right.
But without trying.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard topic.
Oh,
But
yeah.
with doing that, but usually what you go back to Genesis next, all through the Old
Yeah.
Testament, God always intended for man to never separate.
Right.
That was his goal.
Yeah, I agree with what you Kyle said. You should try, but there was no change. Obviously, there was no desire to rectify. So, yeah. Anybody else? How important? Kyle brought this up. How important is communication in marriage? How can each spouse work to make it better? Just some things that I found, and love to hear your thoughts on others. Be intentional about spending time together. Have to make time for those things. 20, 30 minutes, catch up with each other. I know we got kids, we got all kinds of stuff, but just be intentional about making time for each other. Use the I statements and less you statements. This decreases the chance of a spouse trying to defend themselves. I wish you would acknowledge, what I do at home or whatever. Be mindful about the words that you use. Be specific when things arise about issues that you're going through. Avoid mind reading. Man, that's a dangerous thing right there. I know what you're thinking. No, you don't. So avoid reading minds. Express negative feelings constructively. There's times where you feel disappointed or things like that. Just be careful about your words. Again, not qualified for all these things, but listen without being defensive. Sometimes we're ready to fight. Ready to have a little throwdown. So maybe check our egos sometimes when we're listening and freely express positive feelings. Affirm your spouses in your marriage, appreciation, affection, respect, admiration, and approval. Those are things you could work on, or we could all work on, not just you, certainly. I mean it like that. But what are some others you could think of that would help make a marriage better in terms of communication? Well, we don't want to start a fight.
I would just say for me, it's been just making sure I'm checking my pride.
Yeah.
And, cause that's, I'm being honest, from my age perspective, these things are easier said than done. 'Cause
Yeah.
maturing in marriage that's the journey I'm on, so.
Mhm.
But I would say more often than not, communication gets shut down when pride comes into play, and it's hard to stop what you're saying when you're in the moment and just shut up and humiliate yourself and say, you know what, I totally approached that. Came into it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Can we start over or whatever? You know.
Yeah, that backing up or counting, I've heard people say counting. I even heard people go as far as they'll physically back up and be just think what you're about to say, think what's about to go through your head. So yeah.
Maybe related to that is recognizing roadblocks that are in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Our pride can be a big one. I need to take a step back. But there's all sorts of roadblocks that can stand between communication. That we can't talk to each other because there's this issue, there's something that's going on, and one of them that seems like I've experienced. Me and Holly have talked about this before. Is this idea? Ephesians chapter 4 says, "Don't let the sun go down in your anger."
Mm-hmm.
So this idea, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about it right now. This is more a problem with me than it is with Holly. We can't put any time here. We need to fix this now. We need to solve this issue. So let's talk about it right now. And then we talk about it until 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
And now we're not just angry. We're angry and tired. So how much better is it if we can just take a step back and say, look, I still love you.
Yeah.
We may not see eye to eye. We may not be really, really happy right now, but I still love you. Let's take a break, calm down, and let's come back tomorrow and talk about this.
Yeah. Let's table that. Love you. Let's address this tomorrow when we've had sleep and rested. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
The culture and the world teaches us that we're supposed to go complain about our spouse to our friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we come home, then we're supposed to feel better, and then we'll just ignore the problem. And I think that's what a lot of people like to do.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many problems. And the reality is we should be able and to be vulnerable and intimate enough to talk about our problems with each other. That way, when we are around other people, we don't feel the need to do that, and certainly wouldn't feel the urge to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And, we got to be smart about that. There's, 2 kids hanging off her neck, and maybe that's not a great time to bring up
Probably not.
issues.
Yeah.
But if we're not willing and able to talk to each other about those things, the worst thing we can do is to just talk about each other to other people. Now, going and asking for wisdom is another thing altogether.
Sure.
But we've got to learn to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And to realize that maybe the solution to the problem is I need to help.
Mm-hmm.
I need to find out how I can help.
Right.
And not just tell you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, that's, I think we talked about this at the beginning of what message are you sending? And to your point, that example of complaining about your spouse to other people, what message are you sending, about your marriage where you should be, talking it over with each other, and so those things don't get out because it can cause problems to your point. That's good. Anyone else on that particular question? Before we jump in here to question 8, this is kind of a gut punch question. Think about how you treated your spouse this past week. Is that what you want your son or daughter to be treated by their spouse? Is that how you want your son or daughter to be treated by their spouse? Christianity involves more than believing certain truths as they relate to the local church and its work and worship. Christianity leaves the first day assembly and goes home with us. And no relationship tests more radically our love for God than the way we treated our spouse. Anybody have any thoughts about that one?
I think there comes a point in your life, we obviously want to be the example of the spouse that our children become or have.
Yeah.
I want to be the husband that my boys become, and if I had daughters, that they would choose for us.
Right.
Realistically, when I'm not that,
Yeah.
what do I want them to learn from me?
Mm-hmm.
I want them to learn that we're not perfect, and that we own up to our mistakes, and that we seek repentance. And so, yeah, it's a gut punch question, but if I'm looking at my life and going, it's not what I want my kids to see. What should they see next from me?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a family meeting where we sit down and go, hey, I didn't treat your mom the way I should have.
Yeah.
And I set a bad example for you guys. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry for that. I want you to know I'm going to work better. I want you to know that that's not what I want you to do when you grow up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the ripple effect that could cause for later down the road, seeing those type of examples, because we all have bad days. We all say things in the heat of moments and things like that. But that's really good. Anyone else? Any revelations from any of you seasoned people who have been married a little longer than me? Want to comment on anything? Now's your chance. All right, let's jump into lesson 8. I choose to raise my kids to serve the Lord. Now, it easy being a parent these days. Thought about this phrase for a minute. For those of you who have older kids, was it easy during those days? Was it much easier than it is now? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's kind of where I was at, Ms. Judy. Talking about Cain and Abel. Cain killed his brother, and I mean, that would not have been easy to process back in that day. Not easy to deal with. I think about what challenges were present when Noah and his wife were raising children and in this environment that they were in. What are we told about when Noah and his wife are raising kids? What's going on in the world? Everybody's partying. Everybody's having a party. Every intent, every thought was continually evil. So that, to me, would have been hard. And Noah was quite old when he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He was 500 years old when he, after Noah was 500 years old, he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we got all this stuff going around, and then you couple that with building the ark for a flood that was unheard of and a rain that never happened, that had never happened before, trying to preach that these people's lives were in danger. 2 Peter 2:5, we read that he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, which he brought a flood upon the world, the ungodly. And I've heard this phrase before, and I'm sure I'll say it, Lord willing, as I get older, I feel sorry for you kids raising kids in today's world. But if we look back at Adam and Eve and Noah and Jacob and others, it doesn't seem like it was ever very easy raising kids. Maybe there were more God-fearing people around there, but we see a lot of idol worship and disobedience and things like that are going on. No doubt there's more things that seem to be more culturally accepted. Homosexuality, the author mentions homosexuality, unrestrained profanity, immodesty, no respect for parents, parents are best friends, abuse, addiction, communication issues, grief, pornography, suicide. There's many others. Just throw some others in there. But what behavior was most likely culturally accepted in Genesis 19, 4 through 5, when Lot was in Sodom? Homosexuality. So yeah, it was 19, 4 through 5 says, but before they laid down the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, and all the people of the last man around the house, and they called Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out so we may know them. So what about Eli's sons? What do we know about them? The corrupt hypocrites, yeah. They would not listen. 1 Samuel 2, verse 25 says, if someone sins against man, God will meditate for him, but if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? I think that Samuel said that. But then they would not listen to the voice of their father, so being disobedient, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. And we see favoritism. Genesis 25, 27 and 28. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he hated game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So it seems like there have been issues for quite some time when trying to raise kids. Your thoughts for that for the next point?
You know, when we think about that, I think one of the reasons we get caught up with this is because it's fearful.
Mm-hmm.
It is fearful to look out and see that it is harder and harder than it was maybe yesterday.
Yeah.
To proclaim God and not face some form of pushback.
Right.
And we can expect that that's going to continue to get harder in our society if something drastic doesn't change. But in the generation of the very first Christians, those same things also went on. Homosexuality was a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
But not only did you have a government that killed Christians, but they encouraged children to turn on their fathers and mothers and turn them in. It was a very different society, but it was much the very same thing.
Yeah.
We see wickedness. But what's interesting through all of these that I don't feel like we ever really focus on is in the days of Noah, and in the days of Lot, and in the days of Eli, and in the days of the first century Christians, God was the same.
Mm-hmm.
And God was able to do something with good and honest hearts. And he always has been. And that hasn't changed today.
Right. We're going to get to that about Lot and Noah specifically, about how it affected them during all this. You know, they didn't change, but I'm going to go off-road for a minute, and I'm 100% prepared to be corrected with this. I just want you to bear with me 1 second. Raising kids is a project to me. There's no guarantee. We have a formula, but there's no guarantee that what we're doing is going to yield faithful children. I know that we have this image that our kids, 18-year-olds, they're in our house, and we hope that we've done the best at teaching them about God, but after that, we're kind of out of the picture. I'm in the camp that I believe once they leave the house, our influence doesn't really stop. When they leave, how many times have your kids, even though they're out of the house, do they still call you for advice? Or do you still have stuff at your house? You know, so there's still some communication there. Miss Carol knows that all too well, don't you? Guitars and fishing gear and all kinds of stuff. And we know they're going to make their own choices, and I'm not saying we condone everything that they're involved in or the life they're living, but I think it's important for them to know that we still love them. Not that we love what they're doing if they've fallen away, but we still love them. And I use the parable of the prodigal son verse 18 in Luke 15, he says, I will arise and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. And I know this is a parable, but the phrase, go to my father, to me, there's a lot of humility in the son for realizing he messed up. But to me, something in his childhood that made him, throughout his childhood, that made him have the confidence that he could go back and return to his father, that his father was still there. He hadn't moved when it came to how much he cared for him. And no doubt behaviors have to change if they return, but I think it's very important for our kids who are no longer in our homes. This goes back to the trust during the trials, but it is never hopeless. In Matthew 19, 16 through 30, when the rich young man came to Jesus and he walked away, he told his disciples it was difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. He said it would be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle for the rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And when they asked, then who can be saved? What was his response? In Matthew 19, verse 26. With man, everything is impossible. With man, it is impossible. With God, all things are possible. So, for those who have children out of the house and may think that 18 years is all we have to influence them, and our influence just isn't there after that point, Jesus says, with God, all things are possible. So, just going off road there for a minute, I'm 100% prepared to be corrected about that, but anybody have any thoughts about that?
Your point about him knowing he could return to his father implies that he knew his father.
Yeah.
Even though, beginning of that parable, he basically says, Dad, I wish it was like you're already dead.
Yeah.
So there must have been something in that relationship that wasn't ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, when he's hit rock bottom, he knows who his father is.
Yeah.
And I think there can be so many benefits in our children's lives. We know the value of the mother and father and a healthy relationship, but there's a reason when we get to the family relationship in passages like Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3 and 4, there's a focus on fathers and the children.
Mm-hmm.
Vitally important. And it's not uncommon when you see homosexuality and you start digging into their lives, that there was a broken relationship on some level with the father. It's not uncommon when you see promiscuous lives, in male or female. You start digging in, you see a broken relationship with the father. That relationship is so vital to our kids in the way that they're raised.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent point there. Anyone else have any thoughts about that? Let's see. It's easy to grow accustomed to things being, this is just the way it is. You know, this is how things are, this is the way they are. And Kyle, to your point that you mentioned a while ago, I think Noah and Lot, think about them here. Did the environment they were around affect their faith and obedience to God? Noah and his family were exposed to a lot of wickedness while he was building the ark, so 120 years. And Hebrews 11 tells us that by faith he, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark and saving his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. And what about Lot? I tried to look this up. I'm not sure how long he lived in Sodom, but probably a few years, I guess. I'm not 100% sure, but did the exposure to the sin that was occurring in Sodom affect the righteousness of Lot? 1 Peter 2 says that if he did not spare the ancient world but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what was going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual contact of the wickedness, for as that righteous man lived among them day by day, he was tormented. He was tormenting his righteous soul over the lawless deeds of the herald of what he saw and heard. We are told that he's greatly distressed by what's going on in there. We don't see it affecting them to do the right thing. wanting to do the right thing and hold our kids accountable, teaching respect, it doesn't seem to be as stressed, I guess, as it used to. But the author talks about families who will do these things seem to be a minority. But I think that Noah clearly was in the right minority here in this time frame for him, that we can infer that from the ark that Noah and his wife were very alone when it came to living right before the flood. Any thoughts?
Just your thought about Lot, which you mentioned.
Okay.
Remember from Kyle's lesson on Sunday, past Sundays, this ties really well
Okay.
about, he left Sodom, but he been hesitant, had
Yeah.
warnings and
Mm-hmm.
some urgings, and he shoved along, and his wife wasn't, so, she was more reluctant to look back, and
Yep.
so, our environment, Canaan, warned about that, Canaan was.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are will. Maybe it didn't seem to know it as much,
Yeah.
but it could have.
Yeah.
Back to your earlier comment, how you started off this section about having folks say, oh, I just
Yeah.
think raising kids in a time like this,
Yeah.
I want to be used. I mean, what an opportunity, though.
Yeah.
Instead of having little monsters, just adding the problem,
Yeah.
raise little beings.
Right. Little bitty points of light. Good point, Sam.
I don't know if there's any way to really prove this, but
Okay.
I don't think we see a name for Lot's wife
Yeah.
throughout their journeys together. I don't think she even mentioned until Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mhm.
It's very possible that Lot went Sodom single.
Yeah.
And that could also help explain why his wife doesn't want to leave, and his children behave very, very wickedly. Don't seem to have any care for God's laws and commands concerning sexuality later. So it's possible they were very much influenced by that as well. And I think you kind of see that. You see that there's a phrase that, for as far as I'll walk, my children will take the next step.
Mm-hmm.
As they see where I lead, and they generally tend to keep going. And you not only just see that in the life of Lot, you see it in the life of Abraham. Abraham doesn't seem to be shown as somebody that is anything other than faithful, but when he's in a situation, when the society around him is not beneficial, he lies about the relationship with his wife. What do we see Isaac doing? The exact same thing. Where do we think he learned it from?
Yeah.
From dad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. How far we go, our kids will take the next step. I was thinking about Abraham, and I don't know how old he was when he left. Well, I don't know how his father influenced him. We are told that his father was a worshiper of false gods, right? Terah. So the switch he made by listening to God and going out. So, good stuff. The author brings up some verses from Judges. Judges 2, there arose another generation who did not know the Lord. Prior to this, we have a very influential man in Joshua. He was a great leader. He was an example not only for his house, but for others as well. A common theme throughout Judges is the people of Israel did again what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. You think we're there as a nation? Everyone's doing what they want to do, right in their own eyes? Yeah, I think we're there. Do you think Christians are exempt? No, not at all. There's many times that I more than I care to admit, that I was just trying to justify my actions because I thought this was the right thing to do. And it seems like if it can happen then, it can easily happen now. And the author states that it is happening right now. So, does anybody have any points or thoughts about that?
Right, we just talked about this on the phone.
We did. I was hoping you'd chime in.
To the audience, I'd say this too, is just, we kind of still go through that, what about what I need?
Yep.
And just trying to know what line is selfishness, just pure selfishness.
Right.
What line is like a safe, I need time away from something for my spiritual well-being. Well, that's one thing.
Mhm.
Well, I deserve this because I did that, and I need this time away from me alone just to enjoy whatever. I mean, there's got to be some fine lines in there, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, I would.
Where those are, I'm
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that area, but
we are fully, I am guilty of saying, well, what about what I want?
yeah.
Have those selfish moments.
Yeah, and I think that's the flesh in all of us. You know, we want things our way, but you're right. There is a balance. I'm not an expert on to know where it is, but there certainly is. The author talks about a lot of different sports teams in this page 43. He says, never done before in the entire history of the NFL. No team has ever won 3 Super Bowls in a row. Only 2 teams in baseball have ever accomplished this feat. I bet you probably know who they are. The Yankees and the Oakland Raiders, Oakland Athletics. In the NBA, only 3 teams, the Lakers, 3 teams, the Lakers, the Bulls, and the Celtics have pulled it off. So he says one of the toughest challenges in sport to do a three-peat. Three-peating in sports is not nearly as tough as committing to the three-peat challenge of Moses in Deuteronomy 6, where he calls for back-to-back-to-back spiritual faithfulness in families. So, Moses' three-peat challenge, according to the author. The Lord instructed Moses to teach these things to the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 6. If you want to turn there, we're going to be looking at a few verses. 6 verse 2 said that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your sons' sons, by keeping all his statutes and all of his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, that your days may be long. Your son, and your son's son. So 3 generations of that there. And he tells them in 4:6, verses we're all very familiar with. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, you shall love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And these words I command you to obey shall be put on your heart. Did that prove to be a challenge for them to stand before God? Stand for God? It seemed like it was a challenge as they went forward, wasn't it? What? I don't know if we have time for this or not. We got a couple minutes. What challenges do we as individuals face when trying to stand for God as individuals? Are we busy? Peer pressure? Okay. Younger kids dealing with peer pressure? Yeah, you're right. Colleges and things like that, high school too. Peer pressure, yeah.
Some of the things that stand in the way of us doing that, things that keep us from standing for God.
Mm-hmm. Or whatever you like to share. We all can get distracted very easy with things that can hinder us from standing for God. We're burdened. Sometimes we're exhausted and we're mentally and physically tired, and just things get to us, and sometimes we just burn out. But I asked this question, thinking about the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 6. Are we any busier? Would we be any busier than these folks? No. I'd say not. You think there'd be...
I don't have to go thresh my wheat. Get a burger at McDonald's.
Yeah, you got Wendy's pretty 2 seconds from your house or something. Yeah. Do you think there were less distractions? Oh, man. Back then? I don't know. We'll start there. Lord willing, Sunday. Thank you for your comments.